ocean.
Good morning, Colonel, sir. Fine bright today. I hear down at the Burlique'S, prices is picking up, and it's a big year for cotton.
And heroic, a charismatic superstar who leapt off the screen. Men wanted to be like him and women wanted to be with him. But in real life, he was complicated, longing for recognition as both an actor and writer. Devilishly handsome and charming, he was a risk-taker who flouted society's conventions and inevitably landed in trouble. For him, life was a series of adventures. Making movies was one of them.
Well, this is Colonel Braxton Beauregard Burlique the Fifth, adventurer, treasure hunter, swashbuckler extraordinaire, at your service, madam. Well, you know, you've heard of the Titan submersible controversy that's been discussed and bandied about in the last few weeks. You know, there's been a multitude of videos on that, and I'm not going to try to bore you with all the details. I watched this with keen interest. You know, the Titanic, well, that's been something that's fascinated me since I was a boy. And I read about it as a small boy, and over the years, I had been very interested, read different books and accounts of the Titanic. I'd seen a number of the films like Night to Remember, and you know, over the years, Raise the Titanic, that was one. I actually represented some actors that had been in that film, and as a manager. And the Titanic has always fascinated me, along with everybody else. And you know, through the years, I'd have people you know, pitch different projects over the years. So I lost my screen there. And a lot of the projects, people would come in here and they'd sit in that chair over there, and they would pitch, you know, trying to get the old colonel to finance the projects. And over the years, I've had people come in here from pitching chinchilla farms to searching for buried treasure, and even expeditions to try to locate the Titanic. And there was a fella, you know, in the early 1980s. He was a millionaire fella, and he had tried to find the Titanic. Every year he'd go out in the summer and he'd invite the old colonel out to, you know, spectate on his ship. And at that time, you started having that submersible technology, which is a story unto itself. But he didn't find the Titanic. Bob Ballard found it in 1985. He kind of stole the boy's thunder. But since that time, and I think a lot of people would be surprised, and I know I was, that there's been like a small tourist industry on touring the Titanic wreck site. And I thought really the only people that would see that would be, you know, people who had made deals with some of those Russian companies that had submersibles, or, you know, scientific expeditions, or that Titanic, RMC Titanic Incorporated, that has salvage rights to the ship, although they got to get called permission to bring any more artifacts up. But you know, I didn't really hear much about this, although, and I'm not going to get into names, but a number of years ago I did have a fella come in here pitching, trying to get the old colonel to finance the construction of one of these here submersibles, and I'm not going to say who it was. I don't want any, get involved in any lawsuits, but the boy, well, he was a bit arrogant and, kind of a pompous fella, and, he came in and he talked about carbon fiber, and I said, wait a minute, what are you talking about carbon fiber? Deep set, you're talking close to 13,000 feet down there in the ocean, son. That's going to be incredible water pressure down there. And, you're talking about like basically fiberglass. You might make like a boat hull, a chassis for, say, one of them jet skis, or, I lost my screen there, or, some sort of kayak or something. And I dismissed the idea altogether, and then lo and behold, all this few years later, I hear about this Titan and this Stockton Rush. What happened to the fella and those poor people that unfortunately became his victims, and it was terrible what happened. And anyway, I thought I'd do a little video on this. I'm not any sort of nautical, engineer, but I've been on a number of river boats, and I've had a few boats of my own. I know a little bit about boats, but we're talking deep sea submersibles. That's an altogether different breed of cat. But I pulled up a video. This one's kind of a shorter one, and I thought maybe we'd watch it, and maybe I'd offer my 2 cents worth here. So we'll kind of get the show rolling here. There you can see this here Titan.
Parts of the submarine that I'd seen in the testing in the Bahamas just seemed a bit shoddy.
Oh, yes.
They're using industrial piping for ballast.
Yes, yeah, imagine that. This son of a bitch, he's charging these people $250,000 a piece, and he puts in like scrap metal as the ballast on this thing. And we'll let the boy continue.
And they're using an Xbox controller.
Yeah.
For the steering.
And he's using a little game controller like some little boy would use, on his video game, playing in his fantasy world. You're on a boat. You should have a wheel there. Manual controls. Even these here jet airplanes have a backup mechanical controls. They can, do a switch, and they can go back to manual controls. They're very hard to maneuver and control, but at least they have them. Imagine being down there in this thing. You saw the picture, little cylinder, and oh boy, the batteries died in the controller, and you're stuck down there. That's insane. But anyway, and
the strip lightings, something you get at a DIY shop.
Yeah, and the boy had lighting that was from some hunting supply company down there. He put this thing together basically, like he's building some little kit car, and he doesn't even have a plan. He's making it up as he goes along.
Grant says, I wasn't happy with some of the design, like the thrusters on the outside with the cables there. I thought that was a snagging hazard. But what really did it for me was they flatly refused to get any form of certification.
Oh yes, that's the other thing. This son of a bitch, he refused to get this submersible certified by a legitimate either government entity or some organization. In fact, they said that this submersible was the only one out there that was uncertified. And in fact, this boy, this Stockton Rush, if you ever met the boy, very pompous, arrogant son of a bitch. But I will say this, he did eat his own cooking. He was so delusional, he believed his own bullshit, and he ended up, it was appropriate that he ended up, being down there. I feel sorry for those four other people that were victims of his. Those poor people, they relied upon a fake expert and a delusional con man. But this boy, he didn't get any certification. Why? Because he knew that this thing would never pass muster. And Well, let's continue the video. Come on.
And it seemed that they had no intention of getting any certification.
Crazy.
Going down to those depths once, let alone several times. Oh, they also had a lightning strike during one of the tests.
Yes.
Which blew all of the electronics. Yeah, these things happen, but they didn't have it ended the testing. And that made me ask, well, where's the redundancy? Because it's normal.
Exactly. There's no backup systems, like I said.
As human life, you've got redundancy of things. You usually have two of two, so you'd have a
exactly
separate system, and then you'd have two of those.
That's right. You know, I can tell you this. This is an absolutely true story. You know, this years ago, me and a buddy of mine, we took a cheap one of them junket flights to Las Vegas. And so we get on this charter plane, and we're flying, you know, and we get out there okay. Although I probably overdid it. It was a super cheap trip. I mean, some guy got off the plane. He had a suitcase from like the 1940s where the leather handle had rotted away, and he put a shoelace where the handle was. He's carrying it off the goddamn plane. So anyway, we get back, you know, 3 days, we meet everybody at the airport, and we fly back, and as we're coming into, you know, a home airport here, the pilot gets on and says, well, it's your captain speaking. Just want to let you know that, you know, our hydraulic system has failed, but we do have a backup system. We're going to be using that, but when we do land the plane, there's going to be emergency vehicles all along the airfield as we land. So we come into the airport, we, you know, make our approach, we land, and you look over, it was sort of like that, one of those old airport movies. There's a whole line of these fire and rescue vehicles, including the foam, you know, the foam, the fire trucks with the foam sprayers and the, you know, all that. And the plane comes in, the pilot landed it, and, you know, we get off the plane, the pilot, I shook his hand on the way out, and I thanked the boy, did a fine job, saved the old colonel there. And my one friend turned to me after we got off the plane, he says, you know, Colonel, he says, if we ever go out here again, he says, I know you like to save money, but I think we better fly, you know, a regular commercial flight. He says, I don't trust these charter flights. And he said, you know, I knew we were in trouble when I get on the plane, and the flight attendant, you know, her coat is one color of blue and her skirt is another shade of blue. You know, the uniforms didn't match, and they gave us our lunch. They gave us our lunch, you know, in a brown paper bag with a little sandwich and a little cookie and a little one of them, you know, juice boxes. So, you know, it's not always good to go the economy trip and go cheap. But the thing is, this son of a bitch, Stockton Rush, he charging these people $250,000 a throw for like a, you know, a few-hour trip down there. But anyway, let's continue.
But the fact that one lightning strike blew the whole thing was, well, where's the safety measures here?
Exactly.
Just all of those things together made me think there's a lot of risks here that I'm not able to mitigate. And don't seem in control, so I pulled out at that point. That was the end of 2018. Let's be straight, it's not looking good. Oxygen's obviously very
well. This must have been filmed when they thought they might still be alive.
Let's assume it's at the bottom of the ocean. It could still be bobbing along
the
surface.
No.
Just unable to communicate, but that's an issue in itself, because here's another safety issue for me. It can only be opened from the outside.
Exactly. This guy, they say they had got to the surface. The thing had 11 bolts in it, and this video's not going to talk about it, but this was like a Pringles can, you know. It had the metal things attached, and, you know, I didn't have time to get a Pringles can. But the guy glued adhesive around the titanium ring, and this video, we're having trouble here. This boy, we're having internet trouble here. But anyway, there's other videos which I'll maybe cover if there's enough interest. Talked about the construction of this thing, and they had that little a plexiglass viewing thing at the the front of this here craft, and it was only certified to about 4,000 feet when this Stockton Rush refused to have that porthole, that viewing plexiglass piece certified to 13,000 feet. That's crazy that he would think that's going to hold up, and then he made a statement that, well, if that thing was starting to fail, it's going to start crackling, and that's a warning. Well, so what's a warning? It's like a millisecond warning, and then bam. And what's interesting was the thing imploded, and when they brought the wreckage up, they showed that where that porthole was, they had a rope through where the plexiglass was on the titanium ring. So it was a catastrophic failure. And, there's been simulations of what happened. And, this is a very low budget show. It's sort of like you'd have in your neighborhood bar, one of my clubs I belong to. But this is my little reproduction of the Titan, and we would have the titanium ring with the porthole right there, and you'd have the other ring in the back, and just think about this. Just think how this thing's going down to the Titanic, and as it gets deeper and deeper into the sea, you have all that pressure from all that water above you and around you because you're way down in the ocean. And I don't have any of the the fancy graphics here, but say I'm King Neptune, and here's what happened. All that pressure, that thing's going to implode, and it's going to end up like implode, and then those people, you've seen simulations that they were just turned into mush, and it was just terrible. There was nothing left of these poor people, and just a terrible, terrible thing. And certainly my sympathies go out to those folks. And another thing that I think will be relevant is this Ocean Gate. They're probably, if not already, they're certainly going to be sued. There was these releases that they issued saying, no liability, this is experimental craft and everything else. But the point is, this is just reckless negligence, and whatever assets that company may have, they're going to be gone. The thing, they're finished. And hell, some of those people, I think Rush had a partner, and certainly the boy came from money. He had money. He was a spoiled brat type fella who had everything handed to him, and that's possible they might even be able to sue his estate and breach that corporate veil, since that was a reckless, crazy thing he did there with this crazy contraption of his. The only justice in this case was that he went on with the ship as any captain should, especially him, because it was a crappy design. It was criminal the way he conducted himself, and terrible that these people relied upon him, and they end up imploded, and just terrible. I might go over. There's people who've done many videos on this topic, and including like the psychological profile of the Stockton Rush, and maybe more detail on the failure of the Titan submersible. I might do something more on this. It's quite fascinating, a topic, and unfortunately this Rush and these other people, they've become, you could say, a part of the Titanic legend. They will be associated with that tragedy, that another tragedy has occurred. But I mean, You know, I could tell the story about how later, you know, certain somebody tried to get the old colonel to go down in that contraption, and you know, I will say, even my dog would know better than to get into that thing. I mean, that's just it was a death trap. And so I just wanted to kind of give my take, the old colonel's take on, you know, this here situation. So I'm going to sign off now. Well, this is Colonel Braxton Beauregard Burlique the Fifth, adventurer, treasure hunter, swashbuckler extraordinaire, at your service, madam, signing off. Goodbye, y'all.